All right, we're live to all the people in the dojo and the thousands of adoring fans and students out in the rest of the internet. So I'm going to talk about my trip. Most of you guys know I wasn't here for the last couple of weeks. I know Miss Macy taught. Did you do 2 meditation classes? And who did the other one? Anne? I'm sure the talks were incredible. I haven't listened to them yet, but I know that you guys are great. So those are wonderful. And I'm going to tell you about my trip and some of the lessons that I learned and the experiences that I had. So I was in China. The first time I went to China, it was like my martial arts pilgrimage. I went to the Shaolin Temple. I didn't get to actually study with the monks like my Sifu did, but I got to, see the sights and have like a fun experience. This time I was in Hong Kong, another great martial arts city, and did not practice with anybody there except for my mother-in-law, who's a great Tai Chi student, and myself. And I had a little bit of an injury, so I didn't get a chance to move around a whole lot. I walked, honestly, way more than I probably should have. But the public transportation system is wonderful. Who's been to Hong Kong before? Just one person, nobody at home. I'm sure somebody online is like, I've been there. So it's a beautiful city. I honestly was quite surprised by how much like lush greenery there is for such a skyscraper dense city. Like there's a lot of humidity, and so lots of trees like growing out of rocks and walls, and it was really nice. I feel like you can't go very far without seeing some kind of a weird looking tree, and I'm a fan of weird looking trees, so I really like that. The food was spectacular. It's a really curious, interesting kind of blend of East and West. It was kind of a colonial city, so lots of Western influence. And it did kind of remind me of some other colonial areas that I had been in, but I thought that uh, the vibe that I got to experience, because my family there, my wife is from Hong Kong, so her whole family is very much Hong Kong. And they have, obviously a bit of Western influence just living in that city, but they're Chinese. And so I got a lot more of that experience, and it was really wonderful. I had a lot of incredible food, and the way that I got to experience the city, I think, was a little bit different from somebody who just goes and visits. So I don't know if you had this experience when you went, but I got to stay with family. I got to live in their apartment for free, which was very nice because it's super expensive to live there. And I got shown all the cool areas, some of the touristy stuff. Like we went on some hikes and went to these mountains that overlooked the city, and that was very cool. And got to go to the good restaurants, but then also like the holes in the wall. Like they're like, oh, there's this place is really great. That place got a long line. It's not actually that good. This is the one you need to go to. And like that's just the best way to experience any city, I think, is to kind of have input from the locals. Don't just Google it, because there's a lot of secret stuff that you can't find out. So the city itself was very cool. I had one of the students before I went tell me about her experience there. She was like, I felt like it's so Western. I couldn't really experience the culture, and I think that is part of the culture, and it's kind of like our practice. So our practice, our kung fu style, is based in a form of kung fu that comes from China, from Shaolin Temple, and then as it kind of evolves and grows and goes through different countries and eventually finds itself in America, it picks up different influences. And all martial arts kind of have that story, that history. And our meditation practice is the same. So some of the things that we practice in meditation are very much just from like a super simple lineage going all the way back to that same Shaolin kind of philosophy. Some of what we do comes from, some of you guys may have noticed a picture of Yogananda. He's a meditation teacher who came to the West from India and has a meditation center up in Malibu, as well as a couple other places around here. And so we have a little bit of a blend of that. And this is the way that that everything kind of goes that has a decent amount of time behind it. Is very few things stay exactly the way that they were. And that's for good and that's for bad. There's some things that get watered down or changed or forgotten. And there's some things that really hold on to their essence, but then are able to kind of grow from it. And I think that what I saw in Hong Kong, which I thought was really cool, was that kind of interesting way of taking a a way of being, kind of a philosophy, a culture, but then kind of morphing. And a lot of people see that and they're like, this is terrible. It's all changing. And I can see that side of it for sure. And of course, I'm not like, we should go and colonialize all cities and make them great. That's not what I'm trying to say at all. But I'm saying that there's an interesting kind of attitude where it's like we can take from different backgrounds, different philosophies, and kind of create something that is really unique and interesting. So that's what I think of Hong Kong as a city. Meeting family was really wonderful. They have a massive family, and the generation above my wife they all had like 6 siblings in their families and just a ton of people. So I got there, and part of the really interesting melding of cultures was the first experience I had meeting everybody was I walked into this giant ballroom where they have their Christmas Eve dinner every year, and there are like 100 people from the family there. And one of the first things they do is a Catholic mass. And I thought this was super interesting. I was raised Catholic. I would consider myself more of a Zen Buddhist now, but they did this, very Western mass and had this very kind of Western meal with a couple of really delicious Chinese things kind of thrown in there. But I was like, this is not really what I expected from my trip to China. And then they had this really cool thing where they made all of the younger people get on stage and do like a talent show. And then they would get gifts from Santa because they did this. Now, the whole thing is in Cantonese, which I barely speak any of at all. So I had to use my context clues. And you'll know, a lot of you guys have been in class, and it's like some of the things that I'm saying are in a different language. I'm speaking, I'm counting in a different language. These techniques have names that you've never heard before. And it's like, I don't know what he's talking about at all. But maybe by watching, you can kind of see, get the gist of how to do it. And obviously being in class enough times, you'll start to get the language and the names of things. But that was really fun for me, was having to understand what's going on, not speaking the language at all. I can speak enough to say, I don't speak, I can say, I don't speak Cantonese. And everyone's like, oh, very good. I can say, where's the bathroom? Most important 2 things to be able to say. I don't speak this language, and where's the bathroom? But I thought that Christmas Eve was very cool. We had this lunch where we put together like a banquet for family. Also, a ton of people came, and this is kind of a traditional thing where the couple who gets married goes and throw this lunch or dinner for people, and everybody brings red packets filled with money, and that was really nice. We got a ton of money from people, and everyone was super generous, super kind. For family is really great. But while we're there at this lunch, my father-in-law is telling me, he's like giving me some advice. This man, he's very smart and he loves to give advice. And so he's telling me, like, this is how we do it in China. Like, don't be very loud, not lots of like hand movements. This is going to be weird to people. He's like, kind of stand like this and talk like this. This is okay, never stand like this. And he's like giving me all this stuff, and I'm like starting to, because part of what I'm supposed to do is to give a speech to kind of introduce myself to people, and I'm like starting like this, and I'm like nervous, what do I do with my hands, all this. And I thought, I'm just gonna do my thing and talk, and started gesticulating like a madman, but nobody yelled at me, so I think it was fine. This is getting into, I'll talk about my goals for the new year, because some of you guys were in a couple of classes earlier where I talked about this. But after our luncheon, we went out drinking with the cousins. The young people took us out. And I don't drink a ton, but I drank a ton that night because he kept buying bottles of Don Julio. And for those of you who don't know, this is an expensive tequila, and it was quite good. So he kept buying shots, and I kept drinking them. I woke up the next night, or the next day, sick. Tested positive for COVID, and immediately made this New Year's goal. I'm not drinking. I'm not drinking anything until the baby is born. So some of you guys know this. My wife is pregnant. We're due in about 5 months now. So that's a solid 5 months of no drinking. And I'm sure that some of you have goals that are kind of similar to this. It might be something as simple as that. I'm cutting this out. These are some of my favorite goals to make because they're very simple. And the simpler our goals are, the better. But there are other goals that I'm sure you guys have that are more of a proactive thing. Great. Make sure that it's something that is like, I'm sure Miss Macy talked about goals, right? Something that's specific and measurable. So not drinking for 5 months is very specific, very measurable. I know if I did it and I know if I didn't do it. I'll also know if I messed up, and I won't just say, well, I'll just wait until next baby to not drink again. I'll just say, all right, I messed up one night. I'll stop again, and then just do my best to get back on it. It's achievable, it's reasonable, and it's timely. There's the time part of it is that 5 months, and then I'll just go to town after it. I'll go back to, I hope, very moderate drinking. But this is like, I think one of the important lessons that I learned, maybe for the final time, I hope, is that when I travel, I get sick almost every single time. And it's some combination of eating and drinking the wrong stuff or not enough of the right stuff and getting messed up with my sleep schedule. So I had another one of the students in the kids class today tell me her goal. And she said, my goal is to sleep 8 hours every night. I said, that's a wonderful goal. And it's a little bit hard to control. You might be able to control how much time you spend in bed or like what time you go to bed, but there's a big difference between that and actually sleeping for 8 hours. I've been in bed for 8 hours most nights since I started my trip. I did not sleep 8 hours. So, part of it is like, I'm going to, the next time I'm on a trip, I'm going to make sure that I'm in bed early. I'm going to make sure that I'm not drinking a ton right before bed. I'm going to make sure that I'm doing the things I need to do to wind down and kind of get ready for it. So when we think about our goals, there are nice things that we would like to happen. This is like what most people's New Year's resolutions sound like. Like, I'm going to get more sleep. That's very different from a goal that is actually under your control, which is I'm going to bed at this time every night. I'm going to stay in bed for this long. And that's great because we want our goals to be, as much as we can have them, be under our control. So this is one that I can handle for sure. Next trip, sleeping a lot. Yeah, with COVID, who's had COVID before? We've all had it. Come on now. You didn't get COVID yet? You think you had it. There's a test that you can take that tells you if you had it or not. So COVID sucks. I did not learn anything differently than that on this trip. Although I will say, I also have a tendency, when I'm in a new city especially, I pack way too much into it. And I had this 3-day period where I got to just sit there. I went from the bed to the couch, watched TV, and then went back to bed. It was the most relaxing vacation I have had since I opened the dojo 12 years ago. I've gone on trips that last for a week or two max, never been gone for this long, but it's always like running around and trying to do so much. So this was actually so relaxing. I'm not glad that I got COVID, but I'll say my sister-in-law told me, she's like, I'm kind of jealous that you just get to sit there and watch TV for 3 days. And my experience was not that bad. It was kind of okay. And then on the 3rd day, I tested negative. So really nice. So if you guys get COVID, I know that your son's got COVID right now. I hope you don't get it. But if you do, sleep a lot, eat healthy food, maybe some vitamin C, vitamin D, whatever you need. And then if you're like me, maybe you'll kick it real fast in 3 days. The fastest COVID I've ever had out of the 3 that I've had. This is leading me into this really interesting kind of overarching theme with this trip, which was good news, bad news. So if you guys haven't heard this story before, you're going to love it. This is one of my favorite stories to tell. It's a really wonderful ancient story. We'll say that it was in Japan hundreds of years ago, and there's a farmer. And the farmer has his family, including his son. And what they do is they have horses and they train them. And one day, the son leaves the door open to the corral, and their best horse leaves, just runs out into the wilderness. And the old farmer, he's been through it before. He's experienced stuff. He's been around, and his neighbor comes over and sees that the horse is gone. And the neighbor says to the farmer, "Oh, you lost your best horse. That's bad news." And the farmer says, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" The next day, the horse returns. With it, a whole herd or group. What's a group of horses? A what? Is it a herd? Great. A herd of horses, of wild horses from the neighboring fields following the horse. They go into the corral. The horse is like, "I'm home," and they shut the door behind it, and now they have all these new horses. Neighbor comes over and says, "Wow, you have all these new horses and they were free. That's such great news." And the farmer says, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" The following week, the son is again getting into trouble. He's starting to try to break one of the new horses. He's trying to ride the horse, and it bucks him off, and he breaks his leg as he lands on the ground. And the neighbor comes over, sees that the son has his broken leg. He says, "That's such bad news. Your son can't work and can't help you out." Doesn't care about the health of the son at all. Just like, "It's such bad news that your son's hurt and can't work." And the father says, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" Next month, the army comes through. They're conscripting, they're taking young people, young men from the villages and from the farms. They're taking them to fight in their war. And they can't take the son because he's got a broken leg. Neighbor comes over, son's still there. They say, "It's such good news." Father says, "Good news, bad news, who knows?" And the story could keep going. Next year, the son gets into some other kind of trouble. Who knows? But I love this story because it really shows, first of all, the value of perspective. Perspective teaches us that whatever seems really bad now is probably going to be good in the future, or it shows us the brighter side of things. It allows us to see the positive in the negative. And perspective shows us that whatever seems really good now will also pass and probably become bad at some point. Life goes like this. And our meditation also goes like this, but allows us to kind of ride the wave and not be drowned by it. Our meditation has times where it's great. We feel like, man, I'm on top of my meditation. I'm meditating every day. This is my first goal, by the way, that I ever made. Was as soon as I started practicing martial arts with my Sifu, I said, I'm going to meditate every day. I meditated for every single day for 20 minutes that year. And it was the first thing that I stuck to. And at the end of that, I was like, wow, I can do that. I bet I can do other things. And so I started putting together other goals. And a little bit of momentum is super powerful. And so there will be times where we're like that. And there are times where maybe you miss a couple of days, your meditation is just bad, and you're feeling like, I have so many thoughts, I'm having a bad experience, and you want to quit. But you got to know that when you're up here, this too will pass. And when you're down here, this too will pass. Very few people have an experience of life that just go like this. Of course, there will be a time where it just goes like this and then you die. But usually it comes up like this. Nobody has an experience of life where it just goes like this forever. You're eventually going to come back down. And so perspective and our meditation practice really teaches us this. This is a super important lesson. So my good news, bad news while I was on my trip. Good news, I get to go meet the family. It's wonderful. I was really looking forward to my trip to Thailand, which you've noticed I have not mentioned Thailand at all. It's because I did not get to go to Thailand. I had a period of about a month solid where I'm planning my trip to Bangkok and Phuket. I'm thinking about all the restaurants that we're going to. I'm Googling all these cool places to go. We don't have any family there, so it was just going to be all according to what the internet says to do. And I'm getting myself really jazzed up. I've got all these amazing ideas, like the future is so bright and exciting. And we get there, and it's 2 days before we're supposed to leave Hong Kong to go to Thailand. And we get a message saying that the #1 expert, I think virologist in Bangkok, has made a Facebook post saying that there's an outbreak of Zika virus in Bangkok and in the surrounding areas. And if you don't know about Zika, it's not good, and it's not good for you, especially if you are pregnant, because your baby can be born with serious birth defects. And so we're like, oh, this is not great. We looked at the statistics, which seem to be probably underreported in Thailand. They're really interested in tourism, so they're kind of trying to keep it under wraps. And we're like, I don't know. Even if we get it, the chances are actually pretty low that you're actually going to get the birth defect. We're kind of going back and forth on it. But we're like, no, we're not going to go. But the next day we wake up and we're like, oh, but what if we just like dressed in a mosquito-proof suit, and we like look it up online. We're like, these things are real ugly, but I think we could make it work. So we're like, we're gonna go again. And then we're like, oh, but the chances, like, what if we get it would be real bad. And so then my sister-in-law, who's there with us, is supposed to get. She has an eye surgery planned, and there's an expert eye surgeon there that the family is friends with. And so they're like, well, if you stay, you could actually get the eye surgery. And so that we decide, all right, this is going to push us over the edge. We will just not go to Thailand. We'll stay. That sucks. That's bad news. Good news is she can get her surgery, right? It's all good. She's going blind, and now we can get the surgery, and she'll be able to see again. It's not that dramatic, but you get the idea. So we're like, well, there's the silver lining to this. And of course, we stay and we have a really wonderful time spending more time with family. I get to go to the beach in Hong Kong, not famous for its beaches, but did you get to go to Stanley at all? There's this really nice area. Hong Kong is the buildings and the trees, as I mentioned, but then these beautiful mountains, and then on the other side of the mountains, a beautiful beach. And it's kind of like, not quite as nice as Santa Monica, but like a nice little area with, some restaurants on the beach. And I get to just hang out on the beach, sipping from a coconut and having my Thailand experience. That's all I really wanted anyways, was just sitting on the beach and drinking some coconut milk. So had that. And then my sister-in-law goes to have her eye surgery. Turns out that actually she can't have the eye surgery because she has some other thing wrong with her eye that precludes her from being able to get it. So bad news. So it's all like this. And this is kind of a true test for us in our practice and in our lives. This is one of the best lessons that we can get, is to be able to just ride that wave and know that this too shall pass. Whatever seems great is going to eventually end up in the dumps. Whatever seems like it's in the dumps is going to eventually come back out. So I think that was one of the fun kind of ways to experience it. All of the things that I thought were going to happen, half of them did, half of them did not. And to be able to still enjoy that time and kind of turn it into, okay, great, we're going to spend this time with family. I'll get to see the other parts of Hong Kong that I didn't get to see. Very cool. So that's basically the end of my experience, but I did want to kind of circle back to this idea that I mentioned earlier, which is, like, let's say that you're living in this fishing village in what will someday become Hong Kong. You're just hanging out there. You have this really nice life. You've got your boat. You go out every day. You get to get some fish. You get to come back in and eat the fish, and it's lovely. And then someday somebody from Britain comes over and they're like, we're taking all this. It's like, this is bad news. And of course, there's no way around that being, there's some serious problems that come along with that. But the spirit of a people that are really able to kind of take this and say, like, there is, of course, a lot of wealth and things that can come from this. And so instead of just being completely defeatist and saying, like, this is just it, like, we're just done, what they did in Hong Kong is kind of create their own culture and create a way of kind of coexisting. And as you guys know, the city has been returned back to the people now, and there's some people that really don't like how that's going, and I kind of see that as well. But in any case, This is how it goes for us as individuals, for us as cities and countries and people, and as human beings in general. So there is always this next hump or trough coming. So the question is, can we take these experiences and learn from them and grow from them? Can we become stronger? Can we allow ourselves to kind of evolve? And so with your meditation, you'll have these challenges, you'll have these mind weeds, we like to call them, where it's a really rough thing that just sticks. You feel like, I cannot let go of this thought. It just feels like it's just pain. It's just something that's a challenge and it's just rough. But one of the best lessons from our practice is to take those challenges and turn them into opportunities. So when you're sitting to meditate, and you recognize this thought that you're stuck on, maybe it's a song that you keep singing in your head, something like this. Of course, you can have this experience of, I'm just fighting against it. I'm resisting this thought. And that's one way to do it. The problem with that is what we resist persists, and it feels like it's just staying there for even longer. Versus when we can kind of invite it in, learn from it, and then let it go. So in meditation, when you have this persistent thought, instead of resisting it, the lesson here is to accept it, let it in, and then let it go. And this ability to accept, let go, move on is a really important thing for us to be able to get. You'll notice that your meditation will feel a lot more relaxing, which is part of what you should get out of meditation, along with the increased focus and mental discipline, is if you're not fighting against thoughts the whole time, because you're accepting them and letting them go and just returning back to the breath. That's going to be a really nice experience. So let's try to turn this into a wonderful experience with some good news, bad news, ups and downs. Just accept it and let go. Sit comfortably. So I'll go over some details of posture for some of you who are new. I personally do not sit cross-legged hardly ever when I meditate because it doesn't work for me. But you guys are comfortable enough, it looks like you can make it work. You can also sit seiza. What you do not want is for your knees to be sticking up too high. So if your knees are even with or lower than your hips, then you're in good shape. Your position of your back is the next most important thing. So you want your spine straight by having your hands here at your hips. You don't want them sliding down too far, and then rolling your shoulders back. So just an easy roll back, and then keeping your chin parallel to the ground. And then we'll talk about the position of the eyes. Close eyes. You want your eyes slightly turned up. So you can think of this as looking at the third eye or the point between your eyebrows, but you do not want your eyes to be crossed. So if you notice that you're getting a headache in meditation, you want to change the position of your eyes. It's very likely that you're actually cross-eyed. So another way to do it is to open your eyes and look out at a point in the distance that's kind of centered with, that point between your eyebrows, but it's also raised up. So like for me, I can just look like over at this window on the back wall of the dojo, and then I close my eyes again. So if you're having a hard time getting the eye position, just open your eyes and look at a spot in the distance and then close your eyes again. But when we raise the eyes, this is associated with a raised consciousness. This actually helps us to not fall asleep, helps us to kind of keep our mind out of the day-to-day mindset where you have lots of thoughts, which is more if your eyes are straight ahead. And the raised eyes, you notice that if you're trying to remember something, for example, you raise your eyes because that allows you to access a different part of your mind and stops your mind from being caught up with what's happening right now out in front of you. So the raised eyes. And from here, relax and watch the breath. So when I say watch the breath, I don't mean literally looking at it, but you're feeling the breath come in You're feeling the breath go out. And it should be like you are observing the breath from the outside almost, without judgment. This is key. This is like what I was talking about before. If you judge yourself for having a thought and you resist it, that's something you want to let go of. And if you judge your breathing, that's just another kind of thought that you have. So instead, just let go of any judgmental thoughts and just allow yourself to be absorbed by the physical sensation of the breath. Maybe the breath is short, maybe it's long, maybe it's deep, maybe it's shallow. Doesn't matter. Just feel the breath. And you'll notice that the longer you sit still with a good posture and you allow yourself to relax, your breathing will probably start to slow down and become more deep and relaxed itself. When your mind wanders, as it will for sure, just let that thought go and come back to the breath. So the breath is our anchor for the moment. There's no other breath like this one that you're taking right now. This is the only time that you will take this breath, that you'll take in this air. If you do have a persistent thought, one way you can deal with it is to just label it as thought. It's not good or bad, it's just thought. And then you can just set it aside and return back to the breath. Continue doing that as many times as it takes.